Hello everyone, and welcome back to the brand new Harlem Line add-on in Train Sim World 2. If you've seen the previous video, you'll know that I just played through one of these scenarios, which was just a simple run from North White Plains down to the yard at Mount Vernon West, split the train and then head back up as far as Crestwood. Now we're going to do the full run from Grand Central to North White Plains, which despite being scheduled to take, I think it was about 45 to 50 minutes, it's only a 24-mile route. I've already explained how annoyed I am at how short the route is in the previous video, so I don't think it would be right if I repeated myself here. Especially since you lot probably just want to see me driving a train. And that's what I'm going to do once I've got this lot set up. Of course, we're currently at Grand Central Terminal, and we're currently setting up the cab of the Bud M3A multiple units, and we're going to do, I think it's some sort of local, wait no, we're going to do a local service to North White Plains. I can already hear flange squeal. Right, so I'm mainly looking at this and like seeing how the detailing is done. I'm mainly comparing it to how it looks in Train Simulator. If anyone remembers that old Northeast Corridor New York to New Haven route. And I seem to recall that the lighting was far too bright. And this, lighting-wise, does seem to be a lot better in the grand scheme of things, or rather the Grand Central scheme of things. I wonder why there's this reversing, this big return loop. It's like when they have it Bay Head or something, but this curve, I will say, that looks painfully sharp. I hate to think what would happen if you tried getting any substantial length train around it. Anyway, so can't hang around for too long because we're due to leave in less than 30 seconds. I'll just get the doors closed. Okay, that's slightly different door sounds to the LIRR version of the M8. Not M8. Let's get off that. Pet peeve. And yeah, I had noticed that whilst the Metro-North units that you get with this Harlem Line add-on, they are aesthetically very similar to the units on the Long Island Railroad, they are still quite different. Take the horn, for example. On the LARR versions, the recording does sound a lot more generic, in a way. I don't know exactly what type of horn these trains are meant to have, but I think it's like the Leslie RS2M or like S3, although saying RS2 and S3 it almost sounds like I'm talking about Alco switches, which I'm not. Speaking of which, we haven't got any Alco locomotives in TSW. I wonder if we ever will. Maybe something like the oh, here's something that I reckon will be popular. Some route, I don't know what state, but maybe set in like in the golden age of Santa Fe, or Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe streamliners. So you get like the EMD F7A and F7B, or like the Alco PA and PB, or whatever they call it, in the old war bonnet colours. And you could like do a replica of like the Super Chief or whatever other famous passenger trains that Santa Fe had. Or just something involving Santa Fe diesels and war bonnet colours. I'd probably go for something like that. Especially since Dovetail now appear to have sorted out the whole, the licensing deal with BNSF. Since a lot of I'm saying that, but mainly referring to the fact that in recent times, a lot of add-ons with BNSF branding, so like Marias Pass, the SD75, etc. That's all back on worldwide sale. It was never actually discontinued from Steam, but it was, I believe, it was just made to only be available in the US. Excuse me, got a bit of a tickle in my throat, or at least what feels like a tickle in my throat. Right, so one thing I've realised I've forgotten to mention is that this run that we're doing today does have a fairly sizable list of station stops. We've got Harlem 125th Street, which is the other side of the Park Avenue tunnels, then Mount Vernon West, which I initially got confused with Mount Vernon East, Then Fleetwood, or as I called it in the previous video, I simply called it Mac, or perhaps just Fleetwood Mac, that would work better. Then Bronxville, if I'm pronouncing this right, Tuckahoe, which sounds like a mispronunciation of a Maori place name. Then Crestwood, moved down to Scarsdale, where the hell am I? Hartsdale, White Plains, and North White Plains. Sort of feel like I've lost count of the amount of times I've done services in and out of Grand Central in Train Simulator days. But, as far as I can tell, well, I don't know for certain, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case, it looks as though Dovetail did not include any have set it up so that the only part of Grand Central that you can explore are the platforms. It doesn't look like you can go up and explore the legendary and rather or even go so far as to say opulent concourse and like booking hall. Probably everyone's seen photographs of that side of Grand Central. Never those ones that you see in like mainstream pop culture or whatever it is. They never seem to show the platforms, which to me just seem a lot very dingy and poorly lit in comparison to the Grand Concourse. Although one thing I have learnt about one of the reasons why Grand Central is still has the vintage and very elegant concourse and like main building today is because it's actually because of essentially the demise of the original Penn Station, because that used to have a very nice very nice architecture and felt a lot more open, felt like it had a lot more open space than the current iteration of the station. And from what I understand, Penn Station was very controversially, or the original Penn Station was very controversially demolished, and I think by 1968, by the 1970s at least, they got an entirely new station, which I've heard being described as like a warren of rat tunnels, or like as cramped as a rat's tunnel or something of that nature. Speaking of cramped tunnels, I'll tell you what this little bit reminds me of, the East River tunnels when you come out and out of Penn Station on the LIRR. Constant lag again, big surprise. Incidentally, this approach into and out of Grand Central, it reminds me of both Penn Station and Atlantic Terminal in a way. And I just realised there's this 45 mph speed limit, which we need to slow down to. I don't remember how long these Park Avenue tunnels are, but I know that they do end a fair way before you get to Harlem 125th Street. I must admit, I really do like the new horn sound that Dovetail have used on these M3A and M7As, although I don't know if it's prototypical, but either way I do wish that you could somehow update the older LARR units to have the same horn sound. So as it stands, I remember the default horn on those units is quite naff, in all honesty. Shouldn't have done that. From memory, these horns on the Metro-North units, they sound very similar to like a lot of the older diesel locomotives that we have in New Zealand. So like the DCs, DXs, and DFT/DFBs. Thus, although in my case, it's more like it sounds more like a DH or General Electric U10B. And yeah, the DH is just, for those who don't know, is a little Bobo or 4-axle diesel shunter that was built in 1978. New Zealand only had 6 of them, but as far as I know, the U10B is like one of GE's standard export designs, like the U26C, which in New Zealand is known as the DX class. I'm just making a note to put in a link to to a video I've got about one of the DHs in the top right corner. Right. I know that there's still a mile to go before we get to the next station, but I'm not going to accelerate past 45 miles an hour because I don't want to risk being one of those somewhat embarrassing situations where you end up going into the platform way too fast and potentially overshoot. And I don't think I'd want to do that, especially in this case, because our train is 10 coaches, so that's 5 married pairs. Right, so any New Yorkers watching, so like Transit Fan Productions or who else, Mystic Transit, any of you guys are watching, please let us know how accurate all these buildings are, because I honestly don't know. The closest I've ever got to the United States in real life, let alone New York City, is Melbourne in Australia. These days, when I'm just confined to the smaller land down under, usually I don't go any closer to the US than Auckland. I don't know whether to be ashamed or proud of myself for hardly going anywhere. Mind you, it's not that you can go overseas currently. Right, so I just realised we'll probably end up missing the stopping point here at Harlem 125th Street. Or as I initially wanted to call it, Angel of Harlem 125th Street. And more power to those who know the U2 song, Angel of Harlem. I'm not sure what that song's about though, but I'm guessing it's something to do with New York. Mind you, that's probably obvious. It's interesting, first time attempting to stop the train on this add-on, and I've actually got it perfectly fine. And still a little bit early as well. I'll tell you what this station reminds me of, and just this whole section between like Grand Central and here at Harlem 125th Street. It reminds me of World of Subways Volume 4, even though that's a very different side of New York. Because that features the I think they now call it the IRT Flushing Line, like the subway route between Flushing Main Street and Times Square. It's curious, there's another 7A, or 2 sets of 7As. I wouldn't be surprised if this one is pulling up alongside us. It's going out towards like Greystone or Croton Harmon, if I pronounced that right. That could do for a screenshot. Right, let's get moving. Next stop is Mount Vernon West. I just noticed these motor sounds in the M3A. To me, they seem a lot louder than the original LIRR M3. I don't think I'll do like a proper comparison video between the Metro-North and LIRR units. Although incidentally, I haven't really noticed any obvious differences between these Metro-North and I haven't noticed any obvious differences between like Metro-North and Harlem Line versions of the M3 and M7. And I'm not sure, for example, I'm not entirely sure what the A represents. Although I wonder if it's just to distinguish between the different operators. Because obviously the base M3 and M7 is for the Long Island Railroad, and then the M3A and M7A are the Metro-North units. Now I have got no idea what this bridge is called or what river this is, although I would hazard a guess and say it's the Hudson, but just don't quote me. It's my knowledge of New York's geography is not the best, although I do know of course. Okay, I'm now really quite confused, because I initially just realised it might be the Hudson, either the Hudson or East River. Because I seem to recall that, because I remember that on the western side of Manhattan, that's the Hudson River, and and then on the eastern side it's obviously the creatively named East River. At least that's doing the railway tunnels. As I keep saying, I honestly feel ashamed of myself for knowing so little about the railways of New York and like the city's geography, and that's one of the reasons why I'm thankful for people like obviously Transit Fan or TFP and Mystic Transit and just other New York based railway channels. Watching them, you really do get a good indication of what the railways are like in that particular area, even though it's not necessarily much, they don't necessarily talk about the geographical location or like show it on a map or anything. I suppose that's sort of what I do, because obviously with a lot of my real life train spotting videos being focused around the city of Harlem Line. Now so far I've only been in the, hold on, I just realised this section we're going through, I'm pretty sure this is the approach to Fordham, but I could be dead wrong. Actually, no, that's not what I'm saying. This isn't Fordham. This is a glitch. That shouldn't be happening where it's glitched on the inside of the tunnel. You see it floating with this. Well, it's good to see that it's got working destination displays, although this looks identical to what you see on the LIRR. And I don't know if these sorts of destination displays are accurate or not. Either way, this is Melrose. Although I probably pronounced that wrong. Although I can't imagine it would be that difficult to pronounce a station like that. Unwelcome lag means a glitchy horn. Why aren't I surprised? Anyway. So from memory, this part of the route that we're on now is shared with the New Haven line. So if you were to go rail fanning along here in real life, you would more than likely see the Kawasaki M8 EMUs running down up towards the Northwest Corridor of New Rochelle, and then further north to like Stanford, where they branch off to go to New Cannon, or all the way to New Haven. There's a random centre beam car. I wonder why that's there. At least I think that's called a centre beam. Yeah, so in real life, on this section, you do see the Kawasaki M8 EMU and sometimes also the P32 ACDM electro-diesel locomotive with shoreliner, are they called shoreliner cars? I remember that they do look quite a bit like the Comet cars that you see on New Jersey, or like the Comet 4s that you see on New Jersey Transit. And just a random question for anyone, like the New Yorkers watching, if any. Why are the platforms here so short? Like, I'm pretty sure that's how it is in real life, but even so, I'm really quite confused. Like, surely these trains would have some kind of selective door opening. That platform that we just saw back at Tremont, I'm pronouncing that right? There's no way you can fit anything more than like 4 coaches in a platform that short. Because from memory, I don't think we've got working. I don't think these trains in TSW have got selective door opening, which is a bit annoying because you end up in a situation where if you stopped at that station, you only want the doors open on like the front 4 coaches, and yet for the rest of the train, they're all still open, which of course, there's no way you'd have that in real life. Because you'd never want people falling out onto the track. Again. Now this is Fordham. My memory was just about shot. Timing right. Just trying to get a station sign in there, but can't always get what you want, as that boring Rolling Stones song says. Now that was the station that I remember Transit Fan Productions covering in one of his rail fanning videos. And I do still, at the time of recording this, I do still intend to record a rail fanning video in TSW myself, and obviously at Fordham. Might actually include some footage from like Scarsdale or some of the other stations further up the line, but it will primarily focus on Fordham. Of course, driving along here at the moment, it does look weird without the M8, and frankly I'm not surprised that Bronxville left out the M8. Although if they ever do add anything to this route, I want to see the M8 at the very least, because I can't imagine that they'd ever put in like to ACDM. Supposing, or the fact that this the machine I'm using is supposedly going to laptop or more. Although given the opportunity I will try to get, or if the opportunity ever presents itself, I will try to get a proper high-spec computer to play basically all of these games at average of at least 40 FPS, if not higher. I find it quite curious how all these little stations that appear to be quite close together, and like on this section through Fordham and up towards this junction, I think it's like I think Woodlawn is the last station that is on this section, and then afterwards the New Haven line branches off and swings off to the right and goes out towards Mount Vernon East, and then eventually joins the Northeast Corridor at Shell. And the other thing about that route, like the New Haven line and the M8, is that's actually a dual voltage unit, unlike these M3A and M7As, which are third rail only. Because the way the M8s run their services is that they start out from Grand Central on the third rail, as you can see, and once they get past Mount Vernon East, that's where the third rail ends. And then the next is to the north, so they go through those junctions before so long. So there's a lot of trains going back towards Grand Central, just noticing. So yeah, right now the line going off to the right is the New Haven line, I think. And the thing that I find quite fascinating about the M8 is that they can change power modes while they're still moving. Normally, at least with like dual voltage trains in the UK, I believe, at least older units like the Class 313, like the dual voltage variants of the 378 and 377, they have to come to a complete stop before changing power modes, or power collection modes rather. Then you also have like modern units like the Class 802, for example. Those more modern units can actually change from like electric to diesel mode whilst they're still moving. Although I would assume that would still apply to like dual voltage units. Although I'm losing the plot, or at least I feel like I'm losing the plot. Wait. Not even half a mile from Mount Vernon West. I really do wonder why this heavy rail line has got stations that are so close together. So surely I'm not going to make any jokes about people being lazy, but even so, I'm used to stations being like 5 to 10 minutes apart, not 3 or 2. Anyway, of course we have to stop here, and so that means we'll be slowing down. Now, I'm not at all familiar with the service pattern on the Harlem Line, or the New Haven line for that matter, but I do know that most of those little stations that we just saw between Grand Central and Woodlawn are not served by the New Haven line, with the only one, I think Fordham is the only one on that section that the M8s call at. So I'm not entirely sure what services would stop at the smaller stations that we've just seen. I mean, I did see in the timetable mode, there are services that you can do on this route that take about like an hour and 10 minutes to complete. And I would assume those would be ones where you get to stop at all those smaller stations. I thought recycling bins were to be collectible pieces. Yeah, I'm one of those people that, for whatever reason, does like to go collectible hunting. In fact, I remember, I think when Mr. Transit put up a video on his other Mr. Xeno's channel where he was driving on the Baker Blue line. I think he pulled up to like Harlesden station, and then, well, it was either that or like South Kenton, or Kenton, I don't know exactly. And yeah, he went and ran across to the other platform just to go and look for a little, just to go and look for one measly collectible. I mean, that, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, of course, because I do that myself. It's just brought it up because it's what it reminds me of. Those NPCs really do get on my nerves, especially when you try filming like rail fanning videos in this game, and you're trying to get a shot where you think that they won't get in the way, and yet more often than not they'll get in the shot as the sodding train is passing in front of you. I've had enough. Frankly, I've really had enough of that sort of experience. Anyway, just get back to okay. The first number of this first coach I'm just looking at. I usually do like to take the numbers of these vehicles, but in this case, I'm not sure if I'll bother. It's not all that important in the grand scheme of things. There's a big boy score. Look, 40-14. I don't think any big boys were numbered as high as 40-44. Just a minute. I don't think I've got this ACSES thing actually enabled. What on earth does that L thing mean? I mean, it's not like taking L or like L for lose or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, because I don't drive with the system enabled. Yeah, I'm a bit puzzled as to what each of these little messages, well, not really messages, but what each of these things mean. I mean, I know that there's like the signal speed is like the maximum speed you can get up to. Or no, it's like it's either the track speed or like the signal. I know that there's this thing with the track speed is meant to be like obviously the conventional speed limit, but then there's also the signal speed, which is like if a signal is set at a certain aspect and wants you to go at a certain speed or something like that nature. I don't remember all that well, but I usually drive a train simulator with that system enabled because it's a lot more. In some ways, it's a lot more forgiving in Train Simulator. At least that's what I remember. It's certainly nice to see this route in daylight, because the previous scenario, of course, was in the dead of night, and you could barely see anything. Incidentally, I wonder what the practices are like for using horns on these trains in real life. Because I think in some cases you're meant to like do 2 blasts on the horn as you're arriving at a station or departing from it. Or sometimes I don't even know if there are. I know that there are some places have like quiet zones where you can't use the horn at all. I think most of Metro's B and ZF line between Chicago and Aurora is a quiet zone. I'll tell you what, these working departure screens are always useful when you're doing recording a rail fanning video in this game. Mind you, I suppose it's like that in real life, so it probably goes without saying that it's useful in TSW as well. Well, I suppose one collectible is better than nothing. Don't really want to end up, or don't really want the service to be too late. speed, so even if I'm rushing like I'm doing now, it's not like I'm going to be able to make up that much time. Let's just say. Okay, this is confusing. Dovetail, in the unlikely event that any of you are watching, if you've acknowledged the existence of the northern terminus of this line, so why the hell did you only cut this route in TSW2 at North White Plains instead of going all the way to Wassaic? I don't know how to pronounce it, but seriously, why on earth did you only include a 24-mile section of an 82-mile route? It's like, that's a good way to summarise TSW, is just the following 3 words: missed opportunities galore. At least that's the way I see it. Anyway, I like to think that as time goes on, I'll not necessarily forgive Dovetail for their stupid decisions regarding this route, but at the very least learn to, or at least accept it, and try to go along with it. Because what they have provided, like what little they have provided, overall is not too bad, to be honest. Mind you, I don't know how accurate like these renditions of this rendition of train is compared to the real thing. Because of course, as I said earlier, I've never been to New York, let alone ridden on Harlem Line in real life. I like the super elevation though. I don't remember seeing too much of it on the LIRR. Like, or what little of the LIRR was actually in TSW. So one thing I've realised throughout my life is that I'm surprisingly good at complaining about things. Though to hear my parents talk, you would think that's not a good thing at all. Incidentally, I'm not surprised that these stations are all that very close together, considering this is like a considering no, it's not like it is a busy commuter rail system serving quite a densely populated area. Right, there's another train going back towards Grand Central. From this distance, it looks like M7As, which I'll be driving in the next video, hopefully. Indeed, it is M7As. I'll tell you what, I think these trains are a lot louder than the LIRR versions, but exactly. That LIRR route is so bland and like and dull and unrealistic and quiet that I actually, if not actively, try to avoid driving it. Typical atrocious frame rates. I've got no idea how to fix it. Oh, before I do anything else, SD70 ACE in George Bush colours. That's all. Well, not exactly, because we've still got like 6 more stations to stop at. I should be expecting that sort of thing, because I have been to like stations in Auckland and Wellington where sometimes the trains are timed are scheduled to pass each other at these certain stations, so you can get like the 2 trains departing but going in opposite directions like, at the same time. Station is Tuckahoe. Like I'm really confused in terms of the pronunciation of this one. To me, it looks like a Native American name, but it probably is. But I'm not going to state outright that it absolutely is, because I don't know for certain. If anything, I'll tell you what. It actually I forget exactly which station it is, but this one at Tuckahoe reminds me of one of the it's a different station on the Staten Island Railway, but for the life of me I The station that's got a really strange name, but for the life of me I cannot remember what the station is. I barely know anything about the Staten Island Railway, but what I do know is that I think it is isolated from just about every other line, well, come to think of it, so it's Staten Island. But, right there, big surprise. But, from memory, it's like, I think, doesn't the Staten Island Railway use a train that resembles the, well, like a very similar design to the R42 subway cars? I've probably got that hopelessly wrong. What on earth is this meant to be? Is it one of those screens that like displays changing advertisements in real life, like what you see, like what I've seen at some bus stops? I don't know what else it could be. Anyway, of course, we're just coming back to the train or to our cab. First thing I have noticed, well, one of the first things I've noticed is that about this route is that in terms of how you operate it and how you drive the trains, it is very similar to the Long Island Railroad. And mind you, the environment through which we're running is very, very different. Because I don't remember the LIRR having this many trees near the line. That was a bit of a massive learning curve for me because I don't really know anything about the geography of the line, like past Woodlawn. So I thought, because that scenario, of course, had you drive down to an empty service down to Mount Vernon West Yard, and then take the other one half of your train to Crestwood. And I thought Crestwood was south of Mount Vernon West, and I'm obviously completely wrong on my initial assumption. Alright, so after Crestwood we've got Scarsdale, Hartsdale, White Plains and North White Plains. From what I understand, there are a lot of services that terminate at North White Plains in real life, but at the same time I still think it's ridiculous that Dovetail decided to take the lazy route and only includes an incredibly short portion of the line. Well, to quote Bruce Hornsby, that's just the way it is. I just hope that enough people can speak out over these blatant issues. I'm stuck. Oh, for God's sake. I thought for a while I was scared stiff, thinking that I was going to be stuck there and I'd have to end the run early, and that would never do. And if anything, I'd be quite angry if it came to that. Right, next stop is Steely Dan reference. If anyone knows the lyrics of the song Hey 19, you'll understand what I'm on about. And incidentally, I think I said this in the last video, but I'm still wondering if this actually is the Scarsdale that they're referring to in the song. Yes, I have noticed that I think the motor sounds M3A and Star are louder than the LIRR counterpart. Even so, I don't really know how accurate they are. I mean, the M7A, I think I've already noticed that is the distinctive whine of the M7A is more or less correct to the real thing. So was the original LIRR version. Okay, I'm not sure why it's still beeping when I've got that. I'm pretty sure sure I've got that system switched off. Here's a thought, I wonder if you can get any faster, like any faster than 65 section or this route. It seems to recall we could get up to like 70 earlier, but I'm probably completely wrong. Now I've just noticed that this line's gone down to double track, so for the most part it was originally 3 tracks. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just wondering if like Crestwood, or if some services actually terminated Crestwood, and rather than continuing on to North White Plains or Wassaic or Wassaic. Knowledge on the pronunciation dictionary will be quite handy right now, but unfortunately I haven't got one. I don't want to use it, I don't want to blatantly. I don't want to like dismiss the comments, any comments as nothing more than pronunciation dictionaries, so might have to look it up myself. So M3As. Yeah, so I think aside from the blatant lack of Kawasaki M8 units and GE P32 ACDM locomotive with shoreliner cars, the amount of AI traffic along here isn't too bad. I'll tell you what, it is definitely a huge improvement over what we saw with the LIRR. So, even though I'm very annoyed that this is such a short route, I will still give Dovetail credit where it's due, and say I am proud of them for at least learning one of their mistakes. Still haven't learned that it's not a good idea to always make really short routes. Right, so we're running about basically 2 minutes late, which doesn't really surprise me, but just trying to work out how much time we've got left before we get to North White Plains. One thing I noticed when looking through the schedule, like the task list, was that, oh, by the way, that score is the number of one of Kiwi Rail's DL locomotives, 1966. What was I saying? Damn it, I forgot. Anyway, here we are at Scarsdale, which is slowly, well, I don't know if it's necessarily becoming one of my favourites already. I mean, it's too early. It's too early to say, really, since this is only the second time I've tried driving on this route. But I dare say I'll get more familiar with it as time goes on. I just wish that, like for future things for this route, I just want to see, like, there's M3As again. They look like they're running fast, or too fast to stop. I was about to say something in terms of future aspirations, but I might leave that. If I remember, I'll leave it until we get to deciding at North White Plains to initially bring it up. Because I've seen that from the list of instructions in the timetable, we're supposed to obviously stop at the sizable number of stations to North White Plains. Then, after we've unloaded all the passengers, we then have to pull into the siding. I think, from what I understand, North White Plains is one of the major stations on the Harlem Line, and a lot of services terminate here. If anything, that's probably Dovetail's excuse for cutting the route at North White Plains instead of doing the sensible thing and going a lot further north. It's like with what they did with the Hudson Line in Train Simulator, where they modelled that route, but only as far as Croton Harmon, instead of going all the way to Poughkeepsie. It's just unbearable sometimes. So I suppose the sooner we get this, the sooner we get this run finished, the better. So I really do hate it when it runs this slow. Although in my case, like 24 frames a second is just barely tolerable. Anyway, now we're approaching Hartsdale. Usually I try to enter the platforms no faster than 40 miles an hour, although even then you're kind of pushing your luck going that fast. Although I have noticed that the brakes on these Metro-North units, or at least the M3A, because I haven't properly driven the M7A yet, the brakes do seem to be a lot better than the LIRR counterparts. I mean, that's mainly just going off of memory, so I just realised I forgot, I could have, like for comparison's sake, done a run on the LIRR before doing this one. But I honestly don't think I will, because I said in that big update video I did the other day that I only really wanted to, I still wanted to do videos about the Harlem Line, and then really seriously go towards taking a very long break, because, well actually, I won't really explain what's going on, like, in this video. Instead I think I'll just leave a note, I'll just put in, sorry. I'm just going to write down a note on some paper here that's going to put a link in the top right corner to that update video. Right, get back on board and shut the doors again. The next stop is White Plains. I must say I definitely prefer the environment of the Harlem Line to the Long Island Railroad, because from memory that the LIRR, at least the section that they provided in TSW, doesn't really have any significant sections where you're mainly running alongside trees instead of building after building after building. And yeah, it just feels like a lot more relaxed in some ways, even though of course it's still a very busy commuter service along this line. And although speaking of which, of course I don't know what the frequency is like in real life, but like not just in terms of services that just use the like EMUs, like the M3A, but the main thing I'm curious of is like how I'm wondering how frequent the services are with that use the P32 ACDMs. You know, like the services that go the full 82 miles, which Dovetail conveniently decided to ignore. Well, I don't know why. I don't know what the thought process was, but the bottom line, but at the end of the day, all you get with this Harlem Line route, or this add-on, is the 24 miles from Grand Central to North White Plains, plus the little diversion to Yankees East 153rd Street, and just 2 trains instead of preferably 4. And maybe for all I know, they could be saving the P32 ACDM and Shoreliner cars for a future add-on. Which is another point I just thought it might be worth mentioning. There haven't really been a lot of new add-on announcements recently. Like the roadmap in terms of this list of future DLCs is nowhere near as long as I remember it being in the past. And I don't think Dovetail have made any announcements in terms of possible future TSW2 add-ons. I wouldn't mind. I'd like to. I hope that at some point they do make another like modern image UK route. Something like, I don't know. I would probably settle for like Exeter to Paignton, even though that is only about 28 miles, so it's still very short. Preferably something like Exeter to Plymouth, rather than plus the line to Paignton. Right, it's now coming into the second to last stop, which actually looks quite nice, if I'm being honest. Like, just in terms of the architecture, there's a set of M7As. Incidentally, I've realised that I'm going a lot slower than I really need to be. Although, of course, I don't know what the realistic practice would be like in terms of how fast these trains would enter a platform in real life. but I would imagine that it wouldn't be. I would have thought that it would be slow enough that you could still safely stop in time without braking too hard, and then consequently making it very uncomfortable for passengers. Which is why are they glitching through that door? Yeah, these NPCs in this game are very confusing. Right, that's done it. Anyway, see if there's any collectibles we can pick up. Looks like fire extinguishers. Ticket machine. Is this how the ticket machines actually look in real life? I obviously don't know, but if it is, well, you would expect it to be accurate. I like how there's that sign there, the fancy way of doing the station sign there, but actually I'll go back to the cab and see what it looks like from a different angle. If we can see all the way to that side. Oh, we can, but you can barely read it, so let's get the angle right. Okay, so now we've got just one more stop, and then we can pull into the siding, and that'll be the end of it. See, the frame rate's picked up a little bit, but not by much. Just thinking back to like other modern image UK routes I'd like to see in TSW. One example could be like, well, the London, Tilbury and Southend Railway, like that whole C2C network out of Fenchurch Street through like Upminster and Southend, like Southend-on-Sea of course, and then all the way out to Shrewsbury Ness. And that route isn't just the main line between like Fenchurch Street and Shrewsbury Ness. A lot of services I believe only go as far as like Southend, or take a different route through like Raynham, Essex, and like Ockenden, other places that I can't remember. That route, I think, if Dovetail ever do make C2C and like the London, Tilbury, and Southend Railway for TSW2, they would not. I would be very, very annoyed if they decided to just make it yet another really linear route with no branches. But at the very least, I would want them to include both the older Class 357 Electrostar, which looks like a Class 168 or 170 Turbostar, and the more recent Class 387. I mean, they've proven with the Harlem Line that they can easily include more than two or multiple trains with a route. Plus, of course, we've already got the Class 387 in TSW with the Gatwick Express variant. I can't imagine it would be too much work to alter it to make it the C2C variant. There's really no point in speculating like what specific routes Dovetail are going to bring out to TSW, because we don't know for certain until they appear on the roadmap. Incidentally, I can't remember how long ago the Harlem Line was announced, but it would have been a good few months at least. It definitely wasn't here. It definitely wasn't this year. I remember that much. So there's looked to me like there was a load of passengers there on the platform, which is good. I like to see these routes looking realistically busy, because again, I don't want to repeat of how desolate the LIOR looks. So if we can stop it on the right, and we did. Still a bit late though, but made it regardless. Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to North White Plains, and this is where this train terminates. This train will now go to the depot, so all passengers, please leave the train. I can't imagine that's what the announcements would be like in real life, but sometimes I like to do pretend announcements just for the heck of it, to try and add some form of immersion, although there's probably not much chance of that with me being here, since I'm a New Zealander who doesn't really know too much about US railroads. Right, well this coach at the very least is empty. So now it looks like we can just pull into the yard. One thing I don't, in all honesty, one thing I don't particularly like about like the M3 and M3A is the way that the cab is designed. Because it's just this tiny, essentially a tiny little cubicle in one corner of the front of the unit. And I remember when I showed my dad a picture or footage of these things, he doesn't like how there's no window on this side. I've never really known what to make of that myself, but I just roll with it, really. In terms of aesthetics, I do prefer the more modern M7 and M7A, but feel free to let me know which of these units you prefer. Of course, at the time of recording, I still haven't got round to driving the M7A. But once I've finished this run, once I've got these M3As into the siding, I'll go and get some food and try to freshen up, and then record the return trip to Grand Central and that rail fanning video at Fordham, if all goes well. Apologies for the awkward silence, but I'm trying to think, I'm not really sure what else to say. So I think I've already worked out where, like, what sidings are which of these tracks are the main line. Like these two here. I've just got the cursor pointing on them. And something I've really forgot to point, I really haven't pointed out for all that much, if at all, is these random freight wagons that I've seen I've noticed at a few sidings. Like, what are they there for? I mean, like tanker wagons, I would assume that would be like here to provide diesel for the P32 ACDMs, but I wouldn't have thought that P32s would actually be stable here. For all I know, they probably are. Like, I really don't know. It's ballast, what like hopper wagons look like they can carry coal or ballast. You wouldn't want to carry coal on a line that doesn't have steam. You don't use steam locomotives. Yeah, this is, despite the awful frame rate, I've actually quite enjoyed this run for the most part. Like, it's just, in some ways it's quite refreshing to just go and drive on a brand new add-on, and I do like to make these sorts of videos when a route is released, provided that it's something it's an add-on that I actually want to buy. I just noticed those M7As are moving, and so are we, but not for long. Right, stopped in the right place, and there we go. And there we have it. That has been my coverage of, well, my first attempt at driving the full length of the Harlem Line route in Train Sim World 2. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. I thank you for joining me and the Bud M3A for this run up to North White Plains. And for now, I'll just say thank you very much for watching, and I hope you'll stick around for future videos about the Harlem Line as and when I see fit, and whatever other railway topics I can think of. Alright, take care everyone.